Is college a scam? Does it make sense to send my kid to college? Do I need to put forth all this money so that this way they can have some sort of career? Do they need to have a college education in order to get that big type of job?
That's a topic I get a lot in my conversations with parents now is, they come to me with the plan of preparing for college, but more and more these days, parents are asking, hey, is this worth it? Should I be spending money on this?
Welcome back to the Focus on Life podcast, where we help you live worry-free, so this way you can focus on the more important things in life. Today, we're going to dive into a really interesting category or interesting part of planning. But I'll first by introducing myself. I'm Keith.
I'm Chris.
And we're going to talk about, it's pretty ignored, I would say, to some extent, which is college planning. And college is something that a lot of parents worry about, just because the biggest worry that they have is their kid gets accepted to a college and they didn't put the right plans in place. And, they may have been having a worry-free lifestyle for the last 18 years of their kids' lives. Maybe not. Maybe kind of, they're dealing with parenting and to some extent. And then the worry starts to settle in the moment they start applying for colleges and they start seeing the tuition bill, or not the tuition bill, they start seeing what the cost is going to be, and then they start to panic.
Yeah.
And then the focus is no longer on living out their life the way they want it to. It's like, what should I have done, or what can I do now?
Yeah, it's usually crisis planning, college planning. And I kind of disagree a little bit what you just said, is that, it's right. It's in the back of your head all the time. I had it growing up when my kids were growing up, but I wasn't addressing it early on, when the kids were very young. We'll talk about how I handled getting my two kids through college financially and why I feel I'm kind of proud about how I handled it. And that's why I actually decided to focus on college planning as a specialty in my financial practice. I guess I'd like to start the conversation with saying that there are two parts to college planning. There's the emotional side, because this is about our kids, right? And then there's the financial side. And you really have to address both. In fact, if you address the financial side, it makes the emotional side much easier to manage, right? And actually more enjoyable. We'll talk about that. But what you're referencing is something that we call the kitchen table scenario, right? Where parents are doing everything else in life, trying to get through with the kids, the growing up, and they finally get to sit down senior year of high school. There's offers from a few different colleges on the table, and it's at that moment that they're realizing, hey, all these schools cost more than what we were planning to spend. And I see that every year. Again, it happens at the kitchen table usually, right? That's why I call it the kitchen table scenario. But I go on parent blog sites all the time. It's from Grown and Flown Parents. This is a blog site where a lot of parents share advice with each other on how they're preparing their kids for college or how they're getting them through. And quite frankly, it's a scary site for me to watch or to read, because advice from parents who have no understanding of the college planning process and the financial aid system, giving advice to other parents. So the blind leading the blind, so to speak. Not to say that there's great advice on that site about a lot of things, and I think it's really helpful. But I go on there a lot just to see what parents are telling each other. And there's one particular post of this woman who was in a desperate situation, saying her daughter's gotten into, I think it was Virginia Tech, and the cost was going to be X amount of dollars. It was going to be more than they can afford, and she doesn't know how to break it to her daughter that she can't do it. Is there anyone out there that can help me? And to me, that's the big red flag there, is how are you getting to that point where your daughter's become emotionally invested in going to a particular school and you don't even know what the cost is? Now, it wasn't this woman's fault. It's that people don't understand the pricing structure in the college. It's almost like airline tickets, right? No one on the plane is paying the same price for a ticket. Mm-hmm. College works very similar. So if you understand the process, the system, if you understand how financial aid works and merit scholarships, you can control that a little bit more and not end up in that kitchen table scenario where your kid's looking at you with puppy dog eyes saying, oh, I got into this great school and I really want to go. Can I go? And what happens with most parents in that position? What are they going to do?
They give in.
They don't want to break their kid's heart. And as a society, we're kind of almost force-fed this idea that, hey, well, I've got to send my kid to a good named college or else I'm a failure as a parent. The college industry loves to play that parental guilt card on all of us. So we cave, right? And we say, all right, pick that school and we'll figure it out. We'll figure out the finances. And that causes them to either spend a lot more than they wanted to, or worse, borrow more money than they wanted to. Now you've got a major problem on your hands. So we want to parents not to be in that situation, we recommend starting the planning as early as possible, right? Just like any kind of planning, the earlier you start, the better. And I'm not saying you're telling your third grader to let's go visit some colleges, right? That comes later in the process. We've actually built a 9-step process. The first 6 steps happen as early as possible. The last 3 steps are when your child is old enough to start putting a list of colleges together and so forth. But the first 6 steps have to be done as early as possible.
Yeah. And it's funny, like when in the beginning of this, and I kind of talked about living worry-free and that, and you're like, I kind of disagree. I mean, it's like, can you tell that I don't have kids yet, right? And I don't have that emotion yet, so I don't know what to expect from that. And I know how to obviously plan efficiently and put the plans together so this way you can ultimately hit the goal of sending the kids to the college that they want to go to. But the emotional side is completely removed to some extent. I've seen it through families, and I've learned it obviously through you. But the biggest thing that we, and Chris and myself, mainly Chris, can give to you guys is the experience, because his family, both children went to college, both 4-year degrees, successfully sent them there, had the kitchen table talk, went through this 9-step process, and Chris is an author and wrote a book on this, so this way you can help educate parents. But I mean, look, there's people that still read out there, but I think it was important that we kind of adapt and we give you the opportunity and the spotlight to be able to talk to somebody, and them hear you say this and you talk through this. So this way you can kind of engage them a little bit better. So we thought that was an important topic that we wanted to talk about on the next one.
Well, I guess there's a few things about this, and then we can get into the very actionable steps that I think you can take to prepare yourself, right? Another boxing analogy, right? We talked about in our last episode about Mike Tyson. This one was Muhammad Ali. I forget again which fight it was, but an interviewer was asking him his prediction for the fight, but he said, well, the fight's already won. I won the fight in my training. Before I even step in the ring, I know I've won because I've out prepared. I've prepped more than this guy, and I know what to do. So the fight is always won before it even starts, was his motto. So the same thing with college funding. When you get to the point of the kitchen table, if you've done the proper planning, that's a celebratory moment, right? Because the colleges that your child is looking at are going to fit your budget. They're all good choices for your child because you've been through the process of explaining to them what's important or figuring out what's important for them. So that was how it was for me and my kids. Is that when that time came to pick a school, it was a happy moment. It wasn't a moment that I find a lot of parents in where they've got a pit in the stomach and they've said, yeah, that's the school you want to go to, let's do it. And now they're worried about how they're going to do it. So if you do the right planning ahead of time, and when I say planning, it's not just saving money, right? You want to know how to save for college, how much you need to save for college, and where to put that money so that it's you're maximizing your ability to grow the money, but you're also maximizing financial aid, because we'll talk a little bit about how saving money can sometimes penalize you in the financial aid process. But it's also about saving on the cost of college, right? So saving for the cost of college, but also saving on the cost of college by understanding how colleges work, because it's a business, right? Colleges they're technically not-for-profit institutions, but there's a lot of profit there. And they operate like businesses. So if you understand their model and you understand the financial aid rules, there are oftentimes you can get the cost of college way down through discounts, and discounts are otherwise known as scholarships and grants. Right? So we'll talk a little bit about that, but the idea is you have to do the preparation ahead of time so that when you get to the point, those last 3 steps in our roadmap, you've already won. You already know what the outcome is going to look like because you've done your homework. So
yeah, and we'll dive into that. So, I think the next pressuring thing, or the next thing that probably is on a lot of parents' minds is college a scam? Does it make sense to send my kid to college? Do I need to put forth all this money so that this way they can have some sort of career? Do they need to have a college education in order to get that big type of job? Are there other jobs out there that they don't necessarily need to have a college education, but maybe they need assets to be able to do the thing that they want to do, like start their own business?
Yeah, that's a topic I get a lot in my conversations with parents now. Is they come to me with the plan of preparing for college, but more and more these days parents are asking, hey, is this worth it? Should I be spending money on this? Obviously AI is invading every topic of life these days, and that's very relevant for college, because with AI the world's moving faster. People can get credentialed in certain software or certain types of skills that allow them to make a living without going through a 4-year degree program. And then there's the old problem of, I'm going to spend $30,000, $50,000, $90,000 a year over 4 years so my kid can have a 4-year party, right?
Yeah, I know. We talked about that.
That's real, right? There's a culture on a lot of campuses that you're not learning anything. You're just there to kind of step out of real life for 4 years and then come back hoping you learned a few things. Look, I think there's a lot of value in going to college. The statistics still show that people with college degrees earn more than people who don't have them. I think that's shifting. I think that nowadays people that are choosing alternative paths, such as online degrees, the trades are becoming much more important now. You see that guy, what's his name? Tom, the work guy. I forget his name. Tom, not Tom Ford. But anyway, there's a guy that promotes the trades because we're going to need them, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's going into them anymore. So the question of should you even be sending your kid to college is a good question to ask, and it's unique to each child, right? During the past few decades, it somehow became commonplace to think that every child in America has to go to college. And I find that's actually harmful to a certain segment of the population because not everybody's built for college. I don't even know if I was built for college, right?
Yeah.
But I went, spent 4 years, came out with some student debt, and I might have been farther along or hit the ground running if I had gone a different path, right? So yeah, first you have to look at your child and say, hey, what's the right path for them? And do I even feel like a 4-year degree is worth spending a ton of money, especially on a brand name school? And a lot of them now are over $90,000 a year, which is insane. So you got to make that decision on what you're willing to allocate toward this goal. And the goal is not necessarily college. I mean, we call it college funding concepts, or the division of our company, but it really is, it's about the transition from high school to adulthood, whatever that means for your child. So that might mean sending them to the traditional route. It might mean that they're going to go online to get their degrees. It might mean they're going to just go get some credentialing in a certain skill. It could mean that you want to help them start a business and you want to have money to help them do that. I have a client who said, look, I don't want to send my kid to college. I want to have money to give them so they can start buying rental properties like I did and have them build a real estate empire. So whatever that is, decide how much it's going to cost. Have a budget. Say, all right, if I have 2 kids, well, I'll give you my example. I have 2 children. They're adults now, but when they were young, my wife and I were planning and we decided we were going to put aside enough so that both of them could go to an in-state public school, and that was going to be our budget. And we felt good about that would give them what they need in life. And we told them both early on when they entered high school, we said, here's our budget. If you want to attend schools that are more expensive than an in-state public school, then you could do that, but that's going to be based on your performance in high school. So that's why we wanted to tell them this early. If we told them this in going into senior year, 3/4 of their high school career is over. Yeah. There's not much they're going to be able to do about a bad academic year.
Unless they have a DeLorean.
Right, exactly. And go back in time.
Some reviewers won't even know what that reference is.
Right, Back to the Future for those who want to look it up. So that was our budget. We had a budget and we started young. When my daughter was 10, my son was 6. Probably should have started earlier, right? But I didn't even start understanding that there was a college funding part of the financial world until that moment. And that's when I actually decided to make it my specialty. Other things that made me want to do this were just looking at my own experience where my brother and sister all went to college. We were a year apart, which meant my parents were paying tuition bills for 3 students in college at the same time. And my dad actually had to sell his business to make that happen. My mom and dad could have had a much more comfortable retirement had he not done that, but that's the choice they made. And they don't regret it, and they're okay, but it could have been different. And I almost feel a sense of guilt about it, that it could have been different if they understood the financial aid system, if they had done some pre-planning. And that's what we try to help parents do, is not make the mistakes of waiting too late and then just having a big tuition bill to pay and have it impact their other plans, their retirement plans, things like that. So having a budget is crucial, and then calculating what do I need to be saving in order to have that money when that time comes. Mm-hmm. And again, it could be, for us, it was the cost of a state school. And my daughter ended up going to a private school, by the way, because we picked schools that came down in price based on scholarship money. So you can kind of figure that out. But having a budget, calculating the numbers to what you need to be saving to hit that. So it's not just, hey, let's open up a college fund and just throw birthday money and hope everything works out. Know what the numbers are. Just like if you were going to buy a house 5 years from now, you have an idea of the price of the home you can afford. You start putting money away for the down payment, whatever that's going to be. And then when the time comes here, you go look for houses in that price range. You don't just drive around any old neighborhood and say, oh, I like that house. Same thing with college. You have a budget, and then when the time comes to look at colleges, you go find colleges that are likely to fit your budget. And you can do that that, not just by looking at sticker price, but if you understand the financial aid formulas, you'll know ahead of time which colleges are more likely to come down in price to your budget. And those are the ones you can leave on the list. And the ones that don't, you don't even bother. You don't even go visit, because one thing you don't want to have happen is have your child kind of fall in love with a particular school and get emotionally invested in attending a school before you know what the financial outcome is like, because that leads to that kitchen table scenario we talked about.
Yeah, where you get that guilt, and then you feel like you don't want to disappoint your child for getting into a very prestigious school, but you can't send them there because you can't afford it.
Yeah, so whatever it is, have a budget. Again, if it's college, have a budget. And if you're the type of parent that says, hey, look, 4 generations of our family went to Villanova University, and we want our kids to go there, we don't care what the cost is, that's fine too. I'm not making any judgments on it. That's not my particular opinion on how to handle it. But if that's what you want, then you should know the numbers, right?
Yeah, knowing the numbers is important. And, to kind of relay this back onto the whole focus on life, we do this for a living. We do just structured planning with individuals. College is half the time than it is for retirement. So retirement, you start working at, let's say, 25 years old, where you actually start putting contributions away. And ultimately, everyone's ideal retire time is between 60 and 65 years old. Let's say it's 65. You have 30 years worth of time. I think it's going to be
more like 67.
It's probably going to be a lot more sooner. But college, you have 18 years before they go to college. By the time a lot of parents think about it, it's in your situation, they're 6 and 10. So now you have 12 years. Now you have 8 years.
Yeah.
And it's not about how much money you're putting away. It's more so how much time you have. The biggest multiplier in any type of strategy is the amount of time and the amount of compounding ability of that wealth to grow. So this way you can hit that goal. When you get to the it's too late, it's I have to overfund. I have to put a lot more into this, and now I go into.
Well, you're scrambling, It's late stage crisis planning.
Late stage for sure. So
and you were just going to say what? You got to go into what? Your retirement accounts, right?
Well,
or whatever.
Yeah, and that happens, and we meet people every day, and this isn't the topic of conversation when your kid is learning his first steps. This is the topic of conversation when your child's in 10th grade and they start wearing the Villanova sweater, the Princeton sweater, or you go to you talk about the story all the time where you go to the bookstore and they come out with the lanyard or the sweatshirt.
Yeah, they put the pennant up in their room at home, and they're already emotionally attached to the idea of going to that school, and you don't know what the cost is going to be if you haven't planned ahead of time. So pre-planning. The planning should start when they're born. Now, I'm being realistic. Most people there's a lot of stuff on your plate that age. Maybe you're trying to save money for a house, and there's other things going on. But if that's the time to start the financial part. And there again, those 6 key steps in the roadmap, which maybe we can put up on the screen here, are done as early as possible. I'd say realistically, most parents get to the planning that are doing it right. Late elementary school, middle school. Most parents actually don't start until high school.
Yeah.
And that's late stage planning. And there's still, don't get me wrong, not all is lost. There's still plenty to do to control the outcome, but it's much harder at that point, right?
Way harder.
And that's where you're making sacrifices maybe in other areas of your planning to make it happen. So start early, have a budget, crunch the numbers. We go through a whole process of once we come up with the number that you should be, your target savings rate, all right, well, where do you find that money now?
Yeah.
It might be that, all right, well, your target savings rate for a 5-year-old is $500 a month to have what you need when they get there. Well, is that just sitting around in surplus cash flow? Maybe. A lot of times not. So you've got to map out where is that money going to come from. We talked about Parkinson's law in our previous episode and how just managing cash flow can get you there. Not just the current cash flow, but looking at where is cash flow going to free up down the road, right? And how do we grab that, add that into our plan? So having the plan on paper allows you to say, all right, well, here's our plan, and here's a big part of it. Have that discussion with your student. Number one is have that discussion with your spouse, your partner, if you have one, and make sure you're on the same page, because most time I meet with parents, they're not. One is thinking, hey, I got myself through college, so our kids can do that. And then the other one's, oh, my parents paid and I didn't have any debt, so that's what I want to do. Mm-hmm. You've got to get them on the same page first as to what their objective is. Then even more important is now tell your child what the budget is, so that when they get to the point of picking colleges, they know there are parameters, right? There's consequences to to decisions. And too many parents take the approach that, well, I don't want to add stress to them. They're already a stressed out teenager in high school. I don't want to put pressure on them financially as far as that there's going to be choices. And to me, that's a huge missed opportunity, because that's a point where they can start. They're old enough to understand there are consequences to certain decisions. If I want to buy this car versus that car, there's consequences financially to that, right, down the road. Same thing with college. If I'm going to go to this college, am I going to come out with student debt? And how's that going to impact my life 5-10 years out of college? Yeah. So you want to do this planning, as we always say, early, but having a plan on paper allows you to control the emotional part of it.
Yeah. I think this is a good segment into the top mistakes that a lot of parents endure when it comes to the college plan. And obviously there's the ones that we kind of spoke about, starting too late and so on and so forth. But why don't we touch on the mistakes that most parents do?
Well, yeah, that's an easy one. There's obviously starting too late, because now the numbers are much bigger, right? We talked about saving for a 5-year-old might require $500 a month to get where you want to go. If that child's 15 and you start, the numbers are exponential, right? Now it's probably $1,700 a month, right? Which is tough for people to do. Start as early as possible. Other mistakes they make might be when you start saving that money, where do you save it, right? So if you understand the financial aid system, where you save money can matter in terms of how much financial aid you get down the road. Most of that is driven by your income, your household income, but assets will also impact that. So the more money you've saved in general, the less need you're going to demonstrate to the colleges, and you'll be eligible for less aid. Now, colleges don't look at all assets equally. So you can save money in certain assets where it will have no impact on that outcome, and you can save money in other places where it might reduce the amount of financial aid you could get. So you want to be careful about where you put money. This podcast is probably not long enough to get into all of the financial aid formulas and how that works, but there are certainly vehicles that we use all the time that allow people to save, that not only don't inhibit their ability to get financial aid, but also introduce some flexibility into the planning, because that's a third mistake parents make, is they don't build a plan that's flexible. And we'll talk about 529 college savings plans is an example of a plan where you have to use that money for college. There are certain loopholes or amendments they've made to the rules that allow you to use it for other things, such as high school, private school tuition, paying off some level of student debt. But in general, that money is earmarked for college. We just talked about earlier, what if your child doesn't go to college? What if they take an alternate route? Are you going to get penalized now for using that money for a non-qualified educational expense? So flexibility, right? Where you save money, the starting point, right? Starting early. Another mistake is assuming they're not going to get financial aid. Because maybe we make decent income, we've saved some money, we're not going to get financial aid, because when you say financial aid to most people, it connotates a need-based program, right? Almost like a government welfare program, but that's not the case at all. It's just a formula, and if you understand it, you can position yourself properly. And we have many clients well into the six figures of income that actually get need-based grants, believe it or not. It's all a function of sometimes where you've saved money, how many children you have in college at the same time, and what colleges they're attending. So don't assume that you won't get it. Go through the process. A fifth mistake might be picking the wrong colleges. Let's say you put a great plan together. You do everything right. You start early. You have a budget. You crunch your numbers. You're saving in the right places. And then when the time comes, your student just picks any old college and starts applying with no coordination there between that plan and what they're looking for. And without understanding which colleges are going to be more generous with financial aid, what the actual sticker prices are, even that sometimes is a mystery, because it's hard to find on the websites. You could have your whole plan blown out of the water because you did everything right, except your child applied to the wrong schools.
Yeah, we learn that a lot, and I feel like every time I have clients that are really diving into that college, space, and after doing what we refer to as that fact find, that discovery, and we start learning about their situation, we're talking about retirement planning, and I ask them, about their children, and then I find out that they're eventually going to want to send them to college. I say, I have them sit down with you, and then you kind of open up their eyes to, well, why would I choose this college over this college? Well, that need-based aid that you have is going to be a lot higher. So this college only gives you 100% or only gives you 75% or 50% or whatever the case is. Right. I didn't even know about any of that. Like, I didn't even think that was a thing.
Yeah, nobody does. It's a mystery. But if you do understand it, again, back to that boxing analogy, if you prepped, you've already won. By the time you get there, you already know which colleges are going to be more generous, generous with aid because you've looked up the statistics. And one of the statistic I'm talking about is percent of need met. So if you demonstrate a need, and the way that happens is you'll have what's called a student aid index, which is the college industry's budget for you based on what they saw on the financial aid forms.
And how do they figure out that student aid index?
Well, you're filling out financial aid forms at the same time the student's applying to college, and the stuff that goes on, the information that goes on those forms is the financial information about the household, the income, assets, who owns the assets. By the way, a good rule of thumb is if you're accumulating money, accumulating too much in a student's name could be very harmful to financial aid because they'll look at that money as much more available for college, and they'll assess it at a higher percentage in the formula. So just a quick rule of thumb there. But they'll look at all of that and come up with a number that they feel is your fair share of the cost. And if that number is less than the sticker price of the college, that gap is your demonstrated need and you're eligible. So you want to have a low student aid index, and the way you do that is by, again, not inflating it by saving money in the wrong places that the colleges will say, hey, that's all available for college, so we're going to count it. We might do a podcast on more details in the future about that, but it gets involved. But knowing all that, just avoiding those 5 mistakes we just talked about can save you a step ahead of the game. Yeah, you could save you tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you have multiple kids, I mean, I saved $80,000 just on my daughter's college education by following these steps and knowing some of the statistics.
It's huge. I know what I would do with $80,000 right now.
Yeah. It's well, we used it for my son's education.
Yeah, there you go. Cool. So I think we talked a lot about, and we could probably sit here for hours, to be honest with you, because there's so much information out there, and there's so much things that you can do in order to prepare best, but everybody's situation is different. So how do I best prepare? For Chris and I, and back to the whole focus on life, is this shouldn't be the thing that you're constantly worrying about when your kid's born all the way up until they're 18 years old. We want you to focus on the things you want to enjoy, like their first steps and the smash cake on their first birthday and so on and so forth. So knowing the rules of the game, which is one of the big steps that Chris talks about, I think is important. And in our bio, there's going to be a webinar that we host, that we do. And you can talk more about it.
Yeah, we do training on the specifics of the financial aid system, how to put a roadmap or a blueprint together for college about, finding cash flow. So if you want to know more details about that, we'll put a link attached here that you can go on to that training. It's free training to help you get started. But the point of this all is, how does this relate to focusing on life? As Keith said, there shouldn't be a worry all the way through your childhood. You want to enjoy all those moments, but also you want to enjoy the moment when they do decide to pick a college, or if they decide, hey, I want to start a business, or I'm going to do whatever it is that they're going to do in their life. That should be a celebration, right? And for far too many families, it's not. It's that pit in the stomach. It's anxiety. It's stress. It causes so much family turmoil when it really should be a proud and celebratory moment. So that's why I love doing the college funding so much, is because we see the results of it right when the time comes. Retirement planning is far off, and obviously we have clients that get to that point. They're enjoying retirement, and that feels fulfilling for us. But the college part is really enjoyable because, again, our families that have done the planning, they get to that moment. They send us pictures of their kids graduating and showing us which school they picked, and it's a happy moment. It's not, oh my God, what am I going to do now?
Yeah, we want to hear from our viewers too, and the people that are listening. What have you gone through, and those are another podcast that we could do, is what people have gone through, and then kind of dissecting those things.
I would love to do that. Just talk about real life stories, because we have a ton of them. We didn't get to much of them on this podcast because as you said, we could sit here and talk for hours about it. But I think as always, it's taking care of the things that you really don't want to take care of early will allow you to enjoy life more and focus on living life as opposed to just the finances.
Yeah, living worry-free to focus on life.
There we go.
Pulls out the flute.